Call the meeting in order and welcome everybody to the June 8th, 2026 council work session. Can I get a roll call, please?
Councillor Walker.
Here.
Councillor Gabrielle.
Here.
Councillor Blank.
Here.
Councillor Dowd.
Here.
Councillor Waterman.
Here.
Councillor Fisher.
Here.
Councillor Leftridge.
Here.
Councillor Nunnally.
Here.
Mayor Hunter.
Here. We have 4 items on the agenda this evening. Creation of Affordable Housing and Homelessness Advisory Committee, Parkline Trail Design Standards, utilizing city-owned property for construction of affordable housing, short-term rental statistics discussion. Before we get into those, just in case there's somebody here who would like to give public comment in case we go longer or want to give them an opportunity to provide their comment so they're not waiting until the very end. So if you'd like to comment on anything not on the agenda this evening, please step to the mic and state your name for the record or raise your hand if you're online. Seeing none, we'll move into the first items, save us time and so on. And I see a couple of different tasks for an advisory committee like this. The first would be we have the housing plan that's part of our zoning update, some grant funding for that to hire out on some contractors. It'd be great to have a committee that would weigh in and provide some input both on the request for proposal for the hiring of the contractors, what we're looking for there, and then also kind of weighing in on various drafts and making iterations on that and providing comment to the council. Also, we'll get into this topic of the city lots proposal that I have later in the meeting, hopefully. And that will also require some thought and discussion about how that might look in terms of if we did affordable housing on city lots, what type of affordable housing we're looking for, whether it's something serving seniors or families or that sort of thing, and having a committee that can kind of assess that and provide input on what they're seeing in the community and where the need is for something like that. And then other affordable housing and homeless issues as they come up or as they self-direct themselves. Part of that is just thinking about past council issues that have been, hot issues on the council, whether it's the concerns at Depot Park or the Flathead Warming Center, that by the time it kind of came before us, it was, a lot of discussion, a lot of concern in the community. A committee like this might be able to see some of those issues before they get really contentious and be able to kind of weigh in and say, hey, we're seeing this problem out in the community. We need to get ahead of it. Here's some ideas of how we might do that. So I think that we'll have a typical process for any committee where application process and recommendation to the council and a vote on it. I would like to see at least some of the members have some expertise in the social service community that deals with affordable housing, homelessness, behavioral health issues, but obviously also have some diversity on there as well from different perspectives that might be relevant to those discussions. And I don't want to be too restrictive with the selection criteria for members, just given the trouble we have with filling some other advisory committee positions, that there's enough flexibility that we can appoint people who are interested that might fit. I was thinking about 7 members, could go up to 9, but at least 7 members for the committee. And that's about all I had for the proposal and what I'm looking at. Mr. Nygren, did you have anything to add, or staff have any thoughts they want to?
Not a lot to add. Looking forward to the discussion. I would just say, the council does have the authority, at its discretion to create virtually any advisory committee to promote health, safety, general welfare. So it's really, staff would just be looking for any direction if the council wanted to head there. I guess questions for us would be, is it a temporary committee? Is it a permanent committee? What is the short-term goal, long-term goal? Generally a committee or a board such as this would be done by a resolution, but if it's gonna be a temporary thing, wouldn't necessarily need to be that way. Just looking forward to conversation, taking direction one way or another, and happy to answer any questions.
My proposal would be a permanent committee until such time that the council or the committee feels that they've served their purpose. Yeah, Mr. Nunley.
Thank you, Your Honor. So I just have a couple questions that I want to talk through because I think there's some good positives that could come out of this, right? But I also think that it's a little bit aloof and what is totally in within this. So I just want to ask a few questions and kind of get more down into it a little bit. So I don't know if you remember 3-4 years ago, it might have been 3 years ago, we talked about, okay, what would it be if we took on the housing authority? Because there was one of the local service providers that had been continuously asking us for that, continuously asking for money, for property, for change of ordinances or planning and zoning so that they could do certain things. And it prompted a good discussion. And Sid, I think you were on then. It might have been just towards the end of your
I've heard the discussions before.
Yeah. So when we started that discussion and we went through this exact same thing that you're talking about, okay, what would this be? And we talked through that. That organization came out, their board came out very loud and clear that absolutely not. We do not want the city to move forward on this. So I just want to make sure of kind of where we're not doing or that step to do that. What I guess one of my questions is to council, or that step to do that. What I guess one of my questions is to council is, how much do we already subsidize in affordable housing within the city of Kalispell? Do we have those numbers, or kind of what that looks like?
What do you mean by subsidized affordable housing?
Do we already have nonprofit organizations that have created affordable housing that do not pay taxes?
Yes, we do. I mean, that affordable housing is multifaceted, as you could imagine, whether it's the Warming Center, Samaritan House, housing developments such as June Grass and things. But yes, nonprofits, including affordable housing projects, do not pay taxes. They pay assessments, your street maintenance and things like that, but they do not pay taxes. I don't have a dollar value for the entire thing, but the city of Kalispell does subsidize affordable housing projects to the tune of probably well over $1 million every year. For example, June Grass and the Silos are two developments. When you have the Silos and say Creekside Commons, two of the more recent affordable housing projects, roughly the same number of units. June Grass pays zero other than assessments. Silos pays about $500,000
A year.
a year.
How many units of affordable are in silos?
So none.
Yeah, okay.
No,
Oh,
yeah, so market rate versus affordable. So yes, so what I'm saying is affordable housing projects are subsidized by the city of Kalispell taxpayers for property taxes. That's county, schools, city, all of them, not just the city of Kalispell, to be clear with that.
Sure. Okay. So then if the government takes the lead and forms this, just like any of our other committees that we have, what is the staff amount of time that is used on those type of committees?
Depends on what the goal is. Certainly at a minimum, we would have an agenda and minutes and things like that. I guess being run kosher and following state law and making sure the public comment and all that was being run accordingly, just like a council meeting right now.
Sure.
Yeah.
And if we assumed that it was a small advisory committee and the city did not take a lot of time within it, right? We just provided the space and maybe a report or two here or there and do the minutes and everything. In our current makeup of staff, is there time to add another group?
Staff time is very limited. So certainly agenda and minutes and things like that, I'd be very hesitant to obligate any staff time to really facilitating any research for this group or any report writing for this group or anything like that without really dedicating additional staff time. I mean, we don't have planning staff isn't to the point. I mean, obviously workloads come and go, but depending on what the demands of the committee, planning staff, we have applications and things that we have to facilitate. We have to facilitate them in a timely manner, and they're continually ongoing. So we have a workload that going above and beyond that would be something council would want to consider for sure, because I don't want to say we can't do it, but ultimately it's going to depend on the expectation of the board and what council wants out of it.
Sure. And you're right. We talked about doing a housing plan, and I think that's a good step for us to take. Jared, that housing plan, when we do that, that will go through an RFP process required by law for that selection?
Correct.
Whether or not there's a committee in above that, it's still going to have to go through that process.
Yes.
And then after that housing committee gets started, they will be also reaching out to those same members that would be on the committee.
They could. Sorry, is the question that whoever's.
So I'm trying to get at, do we want the people that are going to be setting the parameters also be part of that selection of the beginning of the RFP?
Could be. It may help. So oftentimes staff develops an RFP, and we kind of do it in our own lens. So if there was another group that were to help us develop an RFP and maybe what the goals or what the deliverables would be of the housing study, that would be helpful.
Sure. And ultimately, once that RFP is selected and goes through that process and a report is given to us, let's say we have this committee, that committee doesn't have the authority then to do anything with it. Other than just like any of other committees, it would just be yeah, we think this is good, we don't think that's good. We would still, this body would still have the ultimate say over everything.
Correct. It would be a recommending body. So if it were to help facilitate a housing study, it could do that. It could be a sounding board for whatever consultant was picked for the housing study. It could also maybe take some of the major recommendations out of the housing study and bring them forward to council. Yes, it could be all of that.
Okay. Thanks. I think that's all I have for now.
Yeah. Mr. Waterman.
Just to continue on where you were talking about, Sam. So I'm supportive of the idea of having a committee, sort of where I think you were going, that it can help us as a council have some conversations with the RFP, with the selecting the RFP, setting the parameters, but also helping the original digestion of that with recommendations. So the reasons I think that would be great to have a committee is again, actually to add council time. I know that it's going to take staff time to man something, but then it also takes some time that a committee could help define what the RFP is for the housing study. Also take some of that feedback of what that is and give some recommendations to the council of what they would recommend for us to take action on. Again, we would then still be the ones to start taking the action on it, but to me, it would be a way to help with the solution, like with the processing of specifically the housing study. I guess what I see is there is a group called the Collaborative Housing Solutions, which is HUD funded. It is something that we're here in the community supposed to have, which does sort of work in this housing insecurity space. And one of their committees is a housing committee, but one of the challenges is that then it hasn't necessarily been connected with City Hall. That it has recommendations or some process of what they think would be good, but they aren't able to directly make us recommendations. I think that would be a great way to help bridge that conversation, because again, through the Collaborative Housing Solutions and that continuum of care, they're working on a lot of things from making sure that there's crisis response to what type of services there are, but this housing component has been part of that. And to me, it just sort of helps, again, helps the council do that work, but also take some of that information, again, coming from some social service providers, but their current housing committee includes housing and developers in that conversation already. So I sort of see that as a way to help bridge that conversation with agencies that are already doing this work, but also help us refine what the RFP would look like. And to me, it's like, it would be really nice to charge a committee with sort of the setting the RFP process, because I think that there's also some other things that would be great to include in the housing study. So currently, we have a lot of historic Section 8 housing, or housing that's for seniors or for those who are low income. Specifically, sometimes we see those over on the west side, but we also have them around sort of Sykes area. I think it would also be good to an inventory, because some of those housing are going to hit their sunsets. They're about 30 years old. So they're going to hit a sunset of their federal requirements, just so that we as a city are prepared for that. Because what I've seen down in Missoula is some of those type of housing are hitting their sunsets and then being sold to private development. And then all of a sudden we have a housing unit of seniors which are entering into our housing market. So part of this is to make sure that we're not in that same cliff, but also to make some of those recommendations of what would be good sound policy or where we might want to invest. The limitations are there's not many resources out there. And I guess the other part is it's a scale issue. There are entities like the Warming Center or Samaritan House, which are doing smaller scale housing, supportive housing work, and they're privately funded. But the larger projects, 300 unit side projects, that's where there's availability. I also think that that's where we move the needle on the conversation about housing, because one of our challenges is that we're quickly growing, and are we keeping pace? The study will help us know what type of pace, what are we missing, since we've lost some single occupancy housing like the Outlaw, the Blue and White, but also this potential that there's some other housing that might just sunset out of its requirement, but also be valuable housing stock within our community. So I'm supportive of the idea, but especially because I think that if it could help us take some of the conversations out of our workshops and our time, and then come back, say in a year, when we're back at looking at the budget and had some recommendations of how to just even look at the RFP and be able to look at those results with like some refined suggestions of what they're like, take action on this, or this is a risk that we see in the community. And it would be nice to bring in some of those experts, just again to add to our defining of the issues, so that then we can take action in a year.
I agree with you, Councilman Waterman. And that HUD federally funded organization is the one that told us no, and is the same folks that can come out here and sit and give us that feedback, or give us feedback through public comment and other sources, and I'm sure, Jared, you've never closed your door to any of those before. I don't think our previous city manager did either, right? So I'm where I come from, I'm not against it. I'm just worried about the funding part of it right now, right? We have a lot of other things that we talked about in the budget that we want to fund, right? Communication is a really big one, right? So I just want to be very cognizant that this is not a cheap thing we're talking about of duplicating, right? That's already out in the community. It's already funded federally. Why they're not feeling they can't communicate with us, right? But let's create another committee to duplicate that service at a cost to the city and the taxpayers on something that we already are tight on funds with, right? And it worries me as we talk about funding things, if any of you are following, and luckily just, 6-7 hours ago, Wiley Galt pulled CI 134. If he wouldn't have pulled CI 134, that potentially, in the county, we already recognized, we went through, did the math, that would be an impact of about $15 to $17 million, about $4 million out of the sheriff's budget, and elimination of a number of county departments and services, and elimination of some services of plowing roads. That same CI 134 would also impact the city of Kalispell, and I don't know if anybody has done the math here. I would bet it's a hefty.
Or anything and deliver weekly reports. I think quarterly at most might be the most we'd ask for that kind of meeting, and volunteers on the committee itself, right? So I don't think we're burdening staff if we do this committee. I think this is something that's been long overdue in this town. I think the communication, while available, hasn't happened. And so anything we can do to facilitate that communication, I think would be beneficial to us, as well as these other organizations. Whether they are willing to do it or not, I think we need to take the step and reach out and be the adult voice in the room, if we have to be, so to speak, and start these conversations. And I think this committee is a great way to do that. So I am definitely supportive of this.
So I'll just sort of frame in a little bit, just because I've watched some of these issues. So one thing that makes us very different than other cities that have the same continuum of care conversation is there other cities like Missoula, Billings, Bozeman, all are entitlement cities. So the city staff has a designated funded individual who is doing this work, who is sitting on those committees. We're in that sort of tricky spot where we're not a class one. We're not an entitlement city. We don't have over 50,000 people, but we're starting to see some of those conversations. So I sort of see that this is also an option of us to part-time have it, because I feel if we wait until we're at 50,000, then we're definitely going to be behind the 8 ball on the conversation. This time to have the conversation is sort of now. And this is just that sort of tricky spot where we're at 38,000 individuals, where 2040 is when we might hit 50,000. But there's some conversations that I believe that we could be having now. And again, those other cities do have a specific staff member who's usually the point person for the continuum of care conversations. We do have the agencies that receive that funding and are sort of hosting that conversation right now. I sort of feel like it's just that if it is a part-time or a portion of the conversation, just to make sure that we're, like, as I think Mr. Walker's saying, is having some of those conversations now, what we could have. Because again, I think that that's just a huge gap, is that continuum of care is a term that's used in all of our cities across Montana to sort of talk about this sector. And we're just sort of missing specifically on the housing front, because then there's where housing fits policy, where we have the ability to take action on grants, or also just to prescribe into a request for proposals from developers for something that would include that and use the tax funds that are available for this. So I understand your concern, but that's sort of, I guess, wanted to make sure that everybody is aware that when you're at 50,000, the city hall has a designated staff member who's really funded federally to do this type of conversation.
Or you do what Whitefish and Columbia Falls did and hire them. And how many affordable housing units have they done with their committee and everything compared to how many we have?
Not sure.
Yeah, 0.
Okay.
So that's kind of my point is I'm not against it. I think certainly just by hearing some of this, I think we could flush it out a whole lot more rather than bringing it to a work session right now this early. I think definitely if there was a little bit more meat on the bone to what it would be, I think certainly I would have a little bit more comfort potentially moving into it. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm standing at right now.
And I'll just sort of add one last 2 cents. Some of the tax funds that are coming from coal tax, that's where most of our affordable housing funds come from Montana, does not necessarily require that any housing that's developed is not paying taxes. They might be able to use that for a portion of their space or of some sort of offset. So I just really sort of dismiss the idea. I don't think that we're just talking about entities that don't pay property taxes. There's different models to be able to use that, and how we could have that conversation. But it does sometimes happen.
Committee, my big question here is I would need this council to define affordable housing, because I've seen about 24 different definitions of what that might be. So if we want this committee to look into that, we need to give them clear direction on exactly what that is. So the state is also at fault here, because extremely ambiguous about what that means. So that the dictionary definition of it is that you pay no more than 30% of your total income for both housing and your utilities, right? So that's when you look it up on the internet, that's what you find. But when you look into different papers and things that people have put out on it, they mean a whole bunch of different things. So I think it would be a disservice to these people to create the committee, not tell them exactly what needs to be in that report, how often they have to deliver it, and define what affordable housing is. I think we all understand what homelessness is. There's a whole bunch of different kinds, and I don't think, we've seen them all here in Kalispell ourselves. But affordable housing is something that gets thrown around a lot, and it has different connotations to a lot of different people.
Mr. Leffridge.
I think one of the essential pieces of wisdom is knowing what you don't know. And I am not an expert on affordable housing. But I am a big fan of experts getting together and collaborating with one another in order to come up with ideas and recommendations and being able to provide it to the city. I appreciated your clarifications, Mr. Nunley, about kind of what the role of this advisory committee would be. To me, it seems like a group of experts who are thinking about this on a daily basis, have various backgrounds and expertise, being able to come together and provide those recommendations of what the city can do. I'd be extremely interested in hearing what those are. We can provide a charge, but I don't even know exactly what that charge would be. Indeed, we have a few other things on the agenda tonight, which seems like it would be good opportunities for a commission or an advisory committee like this to be able to kind of flush those things out. And perhaps those can be data-driven things that this committee could put together and would offer a little more context to what the city can do. So in general, I'm a big fan of an advisory committee like this to tell us what we don't know and how the city can potentially fix some of these large-scale problems that exist in our community.
So I guess my question is, what would be the next step? Are you thinking a committee to form the committee, or are we talking this committee up here? We make that discussion. We find out the last time this committee came together and gave a list of recommendations, but didn't get any of them completed. What are we trying to get the juice out of this?
Yeah. Well, let me first, I want to address a few things. In terms of staffing and costs, I mean, yes, I've thought about, cost things. I'm not proposing anything that I think would take additional staff. At least not at this point. I don't see that their work being that heavy, or the work would be on the recommendations they might make to council, and council might make a decision on those recommendations that then require, some staff time. But in terms of, we could have a chair, whoever the chair of the committee is, contact staff about, here's what's on the next meeting's agenda, right? And the staff just puts it out. We can even have a member of the committee tasked with taking the notes and providing the minutes and provide that to staff. So I don't see a lot of staff time just in having the committee. Collaborative housing solutions. So yes, they do get together and talk about things, and it is part of one of their subcommittees to address some of these issues. But that's just service providers. That's part of that. The service provider community that's in there doing that work. And, I participate in those meetings. There is a lot to that work. They talk about a lot of stuff. Kind of the interface with government and what should government be doing gets buried a lot in that discussion. So I see value in this committee that's just focused on what can the city of Kalispell do? What are issues confronting the city that we could address. It also would be more than just service providers. So there'd be some more diversity there. So there's some difference there with Collaborative Housing Solutions. And I do think it can help, because one of the things I heard, out in the community and campaigning last year was this concern about dialogue and interaction with the city. It's why we talked about the fifth Mondays and doing something that, and making sure that email comments are always responded to. And this is another part of it, to help that dialogue with the community and have an interface on issues that in the past have come up and been really kind of a point of frustration for the community on both sides of different issues, right? In terms of reports, I actually have not seen reports from our committee, so I'm curious about that. Would they all produce reports? Are those not coming to council? I have not seen reports from our committees.
I mean, Planning Commission provide not necessarily a report, but there's a staff report and recommendations almost monthly on any planning related item. Likewise with URA, if there's any TIF related project, there's going to be a staff report. Parking Advisory Board, you've seen something. URA, there is actually a state mandated yearly report that goes along with that. So in general, yes, things funnel up through the city, and I don't know if that's what Councilman Dowd was alluding to, but I guess you could.
Yeah, I
but yeah.
didn't mean to infer that the council gets those reports. The staff gets those reports, and then they advise council using those reports. So I don't know of a committee that doesn't have a report that is, mandated at a regular interval. Maybe I'm wrong, right? There might be some committees out there that I don't follow that closely, but, I was part of the Impact Fee Advisory Committee for a short time, and they definitely had, but that's state mandated, so it's a little bit different, right? We also have things like the parking. I don't think the parking is a state mandated one, right? That's a city one, right? They still have a report that they give out at a regular interval. And it might actually be a good idea. Not that I want more reading material, but it might be a good idea if we did get those at council and we could look over them, because there might be something in there that seems inane to some people, but is really, important to me, right? So anyway, I don't want to set these guys up initially to fail, right? And I did have another concern. You already kind of addressed it. I'm a little concerned about stacking the committee with experts, right? All of our committees here in Kalispell are basically supposed to be a representation of all segments of the community, right? So I'm hoping, and I think that'll naturally happen regardless, because we're going to have to approve whoever's on the committee, right? So that's going to come through us normally. But I don't want the criteria to be you have to have experience in this area. There's a lot of people that are concerned about this in whatever way that would want to be on the committee.
Yeah, in terms of reports, I mean, I think I did talk about when we talked about, creating the community reports on the agenda. I would also like to see, at least once a year, we get somebody from one of the committees come in and saying what they've been working on. And it doesn't necessarily have to be quarterly or whatever. It could be a once a year thing. But in terms of reports like what Mr. Nygren was speaking about, I see the committee, there'll be minutes of their meetings, but, if they have recommendations on the RFP for the housing study, staff would include that when they present the housing study to us, or the RFP question to us. They would say, and the committee reviewed this, and here was their recommendations, right? So we would hear kind of what the recommendations are coming from them when they have specific recommendations. But obviously, there won't be a recommendation coming out of every meeting. In fact, most meetings would be a discussion and working towards something bigger in the future in terms of recommendations. In terms of definition of affordable housing, yes, Mr. Dowd, I'd say it's 30% of income, that official definition. And I could see that as falling under their purview of something making a recommendation to council. So And then in terms of the question of, what I'm looking, I would like to move forward and have, get the approval. Did you say is it a resolution that we would pass for creating the committee?
So if the council wanted to formally create the committee, so, the council could always create a short-term committee. It sounds like the desire is to be long-term, to do a task or two. But to formally create it, just like any of our other boards or committees, would be by resolution. And as part of the resolution, we could create the goals, objectives, what it's gonna do. And then at that point, if council were to approve it, people would apply, constituents would apply to the board, just like any other one, and then the council would approve those. So, council could do it a number of ways. As you recall, Mayor Mark Johnson created the homeless task force as well. That was didn't go through council, there wasn't a formal committee created, and that became an issue as well. So if council wants to go this route, I would recommend at least having a formal vote one way or another of whether it's gonna be a long-term committee, short-term, but long-term should be by resolution, just like all our other committees.
Yeah, so I would recommend a resolution. Obviously, we wouldn't put something specific in, like, I don't think, review the RFP for the housing, because this is
Right.
kind of longer term.
Right.
So it'd be more like develop strategies for addressing affordable housing and homelessness, tackle issues as they come up. There are concerns for the community around these issues, and so on, kind of more general terms of stuff that plays into that. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Your Honor. Somebody tell me a successful advisory housing committee out there somewhere, and what they've done and how they did it and what it cost the taxpayers. Give me an example. You said Whitefish and Columbia Falls,
They had,
but they've not provided. Give me a success story.
I don't have it off the top of my head. I know it's pretty common that a lot of cities have advisory councils on affordable housing, so I'd have to look it up, but,
I'd
for
love to
specific
hear a
examples.
success story if it's out there. Before we get too carried away, it seems like this is our job. It really seems like this is our job, and there's plenty of people to come to us that are already out there that need to get together and come present to the council. That's what I kind of am feeling here. You mentioned, tell me all the groups, Mr. Waterman better than I do, and who all's working on this that don't feel they have any response from the city or a partner with the city. Who are those groups?
So I mean, the collaborative housing solutions, again, Council Jared goes to this meeting. I mean, I do think it comes there. I do know that there's when you get into entitlement cities, a city like Missoula or a city like Billings, they have staff recommendations because they have a dedicated staff person, not just their city manager, who is really focused on some of these issues, and that's where their recommendations are coming in. Part of it is just to look at what the supportive housing space is. Specifics, I can't really give what their successes are, but I do know that those are, again, what I see is that larger cities than us end up having a little bit more of a robust staff person who's really working on cohesive this portfolio.
Because they get federal funds to help pay.
Yes, they do.
I just think these groups, this is why we're here. This is why we were elected. We have enough trouble filling committees. I don't know how this one's gonna, maybe it will be more popular, but we have committees that have had 3-4 year vacancies on them that we can't fill. I don't know where this would be different and why people don't feel they can come to us. I think we're pretty good about hearing ideas, and I'd love to hear directly from the people, the groups that are already out there. Is what this appears to me to be. I mean,
I have heard a lot of interest from the community about wanting to serve on the committee, so I think the bigger challenge for me is having to say no to some people right now is what I'm looking at, but.
Your Honor, why do they not feel comfortable coming in now?
They could, but this is a structured group that would tackle hard issues. And, just like the Planning Commission, everything comes from the Planning Commission, ultimately it comes to us. I mean, we could say, why do we have a Planning Commission? But we do because development projects are complex and detailed, and to have a body to kind of review it and do a first cut of things and make a recommendation is valuable and saves time and provides valuable input. There's members of the planning commission who have landscaping experience, have development design experience, and so on, has that expertise that is very useful that isn't necessarily on this council. So I see the same for a committee like this.
100%.
I really want to hear a success story before I make up my mind.
Flowers.
I'll make sure. Just a couple thoughts. One, information, I've argued many times, is how we make good decisions. So I'm certainly always open to information. A couple things that come to mind for me is I too would want a definition of affordable housing, but also a conversation of affordable housing finance. We don't get to that. And to me, that's the missing piece here, is how do I afford this? Even given all these things, it's still out of most people's reach. So I would say that if we define it as something that includes that, in terms of the other two pieces I'm thinking about are the Homeless Advisory Committee. That needs to be a Tri-City committee. It's not a Kalispell challenge, it's a regional challenge. And until we address it as a regional challenge, I don't see this as becoming successful in addressing all the things that are happening that combine to create the situation we have. So I would be more interested in a committee that brings all of the players together. Kalispell is not just the only entity, and we should be including our other partners in this and insisting on other partners in this. The other thing that I would challenge is I'm not in support of an endless forever committee. Having been in higher ed as many years as I have, research is pretty strong on this. If you don't have a committee with a mission and a time frame and delivery, it's just chatting. It really is. Yeah. So what's our end goal? So if, for example, for me, my end goal would be, I'd want to have a regional plan that includes everyone. Then I could get behind it, and I'd want a time frame. I'd want to know who's on that. If it's to continue what we have, I would argue that I'd want to see a case study of how to do this best as well. I'd want to know, where am I going with this? What will success look like? What are we going to say at the end of the day that we're looking for? And it has to be reasonable and manageable. We cannot fix everything. So what's our priority, and how are we going to do that? So those are just some of my thoughts.
Yeah, just to address a few of those things. So finance is absolutely, one of the difficult things of affordable housing. And every community struggles with that. Bigger communities have more resources, obviously, or if you have a resort tax, you have more resources. But one of the values I see of having a committee is to tackle that very problem of saying, okay, we're not one of these communities. How do we tackle the issue of financing and addressing some of these concerns? What are the best practices out there for communities like us for pulling in some financing and leveraging what we have for more financing and so forth? So rather than trying to answer that question first, I'd say the purpose of the committee is to help us identify those things. That's what would come up.
Sorry, agreed. Mine was more the charge, that it can't just be affordable housing, because who I would put on that committee if I were looking at affordable housing finance would be bankers. I'd have a whole different list of people that I'd want to have on that. So I'm just thinking we need to think carefully about what we're saying is our goal, and then that will inform what we need to do. And I don't know that we've talked enough about that.
Yeah, I would definitely see that one of the goals, but it's a big topic. And so I would, rather than try and narrow it, I would actually want to keep it open so that this committee can address a lot of topics under there. And I'd say, bankers would be good on the financing side, but there's also, service providers who do a lot of projects like this and are very familiar with those financing challenges and what kind of the other communities are doing and so forth. In terms of regional approach, I totally agree with you. I would love to see a regional approach. Mr. Graham, prior council member, had brought that up as well, and talked about us having a meeting with Whitefish and Columbia Falls on that. And former Mayor Johnson talked about, we have these conversations. I worked with Mayor Johnson, spoke with the other mayors about trying to pull something like that together, and there was, frankly, not the interest from the other communities. So I would love to do it. We've tried to do it. We weren't able to pull it off. I'm always open to doing that more. But we need other players to kind of, and I'd hate to torpedo this because they've got their own thing. Whitefish's got their own thing going on, but they don't seem interested in doing a Tri-City thing. And of course, the county is MIA. So, Mr. Dowd.
Thanks. I really resonate with a lot of the refining that Councilor Blank just put out. My gut tells me we should make a temporary committee that has a specific goal and a specific time period. See what we think of those results. And if that looks like it's going to be beneficial to have on an annual or however many, whatever interval basis, then we could consider a standing committee. But, the other thing is, Kalispell in this area is more impacted if we've switched from affordable housing to homelessness. Kalispell is impacted greater than any other microcosm of this valley with homelessness because all of the services are here in Kalispell. Not all of the homelessness originates in Kalispell, but all of the services are here. And if we're going to expand this committee and, maybe we can shame the other cities into joining it. Keep 3 spots open. Maybe we make it a 9-person committee. 3 of those spots, one for Whitefish, one for the county, and one for Columbia Falls. Just keep those open and say, hey, we're still looking for a representative from your city to come help us in this regional problem, right? Hearing from the mayors that say they're not interested, there's going to be somebody either on that council or in that city staff that does care. And we can make this happen, and I'm all for using free market alternatives to get people to the table. Shaming is a great thing to do. I mean, that's a great free market approach to, getting somebody to do something that they don't maybe want to do, right? So those are just some ideas that I had after listening to Councilor Blank.
I like the idea. I appreciate it. I do think, when we're talking about a housing study for Kalispell or, project specifically for Kalispell, it may be difficult to have City of Whitefish or City of Columbia Falls. I agree there's kind of like a regional component, but I think a lot of it will be specific to Kalispell, and stuff for our government, our council. So I could see that. But also I want to clarify with the mayors, one said that he wasn't interested. Another said he was, but there was never follow through. So I don't want to disparage too much.
I will. I'm fine with that.
Ms. Gabriel?
Thank you, Your Honor. Gosh, I agreed with an awful lot of what Councilwoman Blank said as well. And also Mr. Dowd and I agreed with a lot of what all of you said, actually. I do think that council needs to define this more before we throw it out there and start a committee. I certainly don't believe we're ready to start a permanent committee. I believe there does need to be a tri-city solution, as Counselor Blank said. We really do need the buy-in, what Mr. Dowd just said is somebody on one of those councils is going to agree and want to be part of that. And I don't think it necessarily has to exclude the communities of Big Fork, Lakeside. You know, if somebody in that Northern Valley part is really interested and wants to join in and be part of that, that's fine. Mr. Waterman's overview of the existing housing committee, maybe we ask them what they think it should look like too, you know, on a temporary basis. I just don't feel like we're ready to appoint another long-term committee. I certainly don't believe we can tax staff at this point with monitoring this group. I think we have to have this more defined and perhaps start with the temporary group and see where it goes. I'm not saying, Your Honor, that I think this is a bad idea. I don't think that at all. I think it's a great idea to have all of these groups meet. I just hate to see meetings duplicated. And if there are folks on this other committee that want to chime in and give us their thoughts on what this formal committee should look like, I think we should take their input. And I really hope they're not feeling like they've been shut down. And I would hope they feel comfortable letting us know their thoughts. Because like you pointed out, they are the experts in this area. They're in it every day. They're the ones rolling up their sleeves looking for solutions. And I think we need to listen to them. However, we also have to figure out how we pay for it. That's the big elephant in the room, is how are we going to pay for it? Thank you.
Mr. Waterman.
All right, I'll jump in with a little bit more. So when we're talking about the Tri-City and where we have that conversation, I'll point out that the health board can talk about community health and environmental health. Our current state of where we are post 2020 is we have really decreased the amount of funding for community health on the health board, the Flathead County County Health Board. And we have plenty of environmental health. That's going to be your sanitariums, and people are doing that. So I would argue that if we wanted to find that Tri-City or that communication, that would go underneath the health board. But having served on the health board and been around these conversations, housing doesn't really fit into that community health side of things. I also look at like our service providers. They do really work to talk about what to do about the service side of things. They're really working on it. But again, as the people pointed out, they aren't necessarily housing experts. So that ends up being a challenge. Again, housing ends up being that sort of missing piece there. So I do sort of would say we should be encouraged. I mean, here's what the Collaborative Housing Solutions Subcommittee on Housing uses as the definition: increase affordable and supportive permanent housing opportunities for those who are homeless or at risk of homeless. And that sort of gets into the define, but it really gets really close into that missing piece, I feel, because I don't think that all social workers aren't necessarily going to be housing experts. But if we wanted to narrow down, just being that we're looking at supportive permanent housing for those who are homeless or at risk of homeless, that's policy recommendations that we can do, or finding funding that might be able to work to make something happen. Again, I think that the service providers, they're looking on their services, and they're pretty well networked on that side. Getting back to that final thing, if you want to have a larger community conversation, I would recommend that would go through the health department, because that is the agency, the interlocal agency that already exists, to be able to talk about that. But that the health department has really cut down on the community health side of things, and part of that is just a budget decision to make sure that they had sanitariums in the environmental health side. So I would again say that interlocal space talks about some of these things, but they also do not talk about housing. And like that's also, the health board is not charged to talk about housing policy.
May I, Your Honor? So I actually believe a good path forward, given what I'm hearing, there's support for the committee. The good thing is there is a housing study budgeted, and this is the segue into all of it. The housing study can the committee can help staff develop the RFP, which is critical because it can help us talk about deliverables and deliverables that maybe we're not thinking about even on the service delivery side. It can talk about committees and committees that other municipalities across the nation have implemented and the type of recommendations they would be considering for council, funding opportunities and all those types of things. The good thing is through the pro housing grant, we have, pretty good chunk of money for a housing study, so we could get a pretty extensive one, and having that sounding board and getting a committee together in the interim. I'll say one thing that would be very helpful as well, this committee could help define what affordable housing is, and the housing study can do that as well, because one thing the state legislature did do is define workforce housing. So workforce housing is 60 to 140% area median income. My kind of simple brain goes right to, well, below 60 would be affordable, but maybe it's a little more nuanced than that. But certainly the housing study can further define that, and the council can adopt a formal policy as well around it, which would be helpful. But all of that can be developed through the housing study coordinated by this group. So that would be a pretty formal but informal, not creating a committee long-term, but at least, laying the groundwork to develop this housing study, which would be an integral component and will give the city action items moving forward.
Mr. Nunley.
Councilman Waterman, can you go back, can you read that part again about what CHB does?
So collaborative housing solutions, this, what I read was the subcommittee that's around housing.
Okay,
So that subcommittee's charge is increased affordable and supportive permanent housing opportunities for people who are homeless or at risk of homeless.
so they created a subcommittee, and is anybody, because I know you two go to that, are either of you on that subcommittee?
I am.
So you are. So we already have a government tie into it.
I'm not representing the city when I'm there.
You're representing yourself. So maybe instead of creating a whole new committee, could we just find a way and an avenue to get that city representation onto that already formed, funded, operating committee around it?
Again, this is just the service community, and
function. And you're going to be hearing things that the community is going to bring to us prior to that. So, it might be okay. It's just something that I'm a little bit, after being recused from a vote or two, you kind of get that little chip on your shoulder where, hey, this sounds like it might be something that Jonna might want to put her 2 cents in on. So,
And I would agree with that, right? The only reason I'm saying that is the group that came in and shut us down the last time.
that committee has not presented, that subcommittee has not presented anything to the council before.
Correct, but the board is the board that came in here and chastised for doing what we're doing right now.
I don't recall that, but, so, Ms. Blank, I'm curious, would a 1-year, timeframe for the committee to work on the housing study and then kind of develop, its proposals for, its long-term objectives that we could review, after we've, looked at their recommendations for the study, and then we can see if this is a committee we want to continue, and have them tackle the kind of the agenda or whatever you want to call it that they've presented, that, hey, this is what we think this committee can accomplish and can recommend to the council moving forward. Would you feel comfortable with that?
I need to ask Jared one question. So the housing study, is there a deadline on that? I'm just thinking we should map onto those if, I don't know.
Yeah, I would just tie it to the housing study itself, because that housing study will have recommendations in it. Likely we'll have a recommendation in there, per Councilman Fisher about committees and how a committee could work in this situation. Our goal is to be out for an RFP very soon, and then probably a 6-month development of the housing study itself. So it'd be a which is good. It does create that goal and it creates a tight timeline, so it's not this long-term thing. But the council's ultimately going to have to adopt that housing plan, and then from there, the council will, I believe, have pretty strong direction on where it should or shouldn't be heading, I should say.
So would a year be a good timeline for that then?
Yeah, I don't think it'll take that long.
Okay, I'm
but
just
certainly.
thinking
I
we
mean,
should be
yeah,
thoughtful about
that would
that.
easily encompass that.
Then I think I would be in support that two things that I'm not giving up on the regional approach. And I think one of the things I want to do is go to the University of Montana and say, where's a grad student, do this research. I want to know what Whitefish is doing. I want to know what Columbia Falls is doing. I want to know what Kalispell is doing. I want it mapped out so we can see it, right? I really think that's information we're missing. And there's got to be a grad student. That's a great master's thesis. If I were in grad school, I would do it. So if maybe someone's out there listening right now, they need an idea. I don't want to give that up because I feel like the way forward is all hands on deck.
Yeah.
And I just don't want to give that up as a vision. And I also really hope we can put the finance in there. Just everything I've read, that's the piece that it's the sticky wicket, but it's the one that creates the accessibility, right? And then the only other piece I would, and maybe it's already in there, Jared, and I'm sorry, I'm thinking about affordable housing in terms of for which population? Is it seniors? Is it working families? I just think we want to be really thoughtful about that as well, so that we're really thinking carefully about who needs what. And
That would be their charge.
yeah, so I think in the charge, those are the kinds of things
That
I'd
would be
want.
one of the key deliverables would be the demographics, the affordability of the different demographics,
Yeah.
and then forecasting that out as
Okay.
well, because obviously we have an aging population as well. So I think those would have been some of the things we would have been wanting
Okay,
to prioritize in the RFP, but there's a lot of other nuances that we may not be thinking about where some other brains, because really the RFP is what builds what's going to be delivered. So having some help on that would help us out.
okay. Those are my thoughts.
So it sounds like we have a time frame, a direction limited to the housing study and kind of what comes out of the housing study, and that will help identify what this community. And in terms of, I totally agree with you about, that's exactly what I thought this committee would do, is help say, this is what other communities are doing, and that it's been successful, and here's what we could try, So that's exactly what I thought this committee could help us with, was that specific question. Okay.
All I was gonna say is when I saw the work package come out or the pack we get on Thursday, I was like, this is no way we can do these 4 things in one night. Every single one of these is a work session in and of itself, and we've gotten probably most of the way through the first item on our agenda, and it's 8:10. So I just want to make sure that we have a realistic. Now, nothing says that we can't address some of these other points later. I just want to make sure that we're not going to try to slug it out and do all of these if each one's going to take this same amount of time. Plus, we haven't heard public comment on this yet, which may be extensive or it may be nothing. Who knows? I wanted to put some guardrails on this just to make sure that we're not going to stress out the council and the public with all of this discussion tonight. So just something to keep in mind and to consider.
Yeah, we'll see how we, I think the intention was see how we go, where we get to. So I feel like we're concluding this topic. We've reached some sense of direction here. So we can.
Just so there is clarification, on a future agenda, as we get closer to doing an RFP for the housing study, the council would, through the mayor, at least appoint like an interim committee for the housing study. Okay. Sounds
That's what
good.
I heard.
That's what,
Yes.
okay.
Okay, so moving on to the next agenda item, the Parkline Trail Design Standards. So my thought on this was, needing to have standards to fulfill the vision of our core area plan. Our core area plan is ambitious, and actually, if we could pull up, if we have the core area plan and some of the renderings from that, if we can pull that up on the screen. I think the vision is wonderful for it. And the idea of making the trail really a destination for the community, something to revitalize our downtown. I think if it's been a while since you've read the core area plan, to revisit it, I think it's a wonderful vision. But I think we risk not fulfilling that vision. And I've spoken a lot about one of the most recent developments we had on it is a parking lot with the building at a further distance. And nothing could kill the Parkline Trail quicker than lining it with parking lots as our development. We adopted design standards for our downtown area that I thought were very good, that results in a more walkable downtown, more engaging facades, more engaging buildings for the pedestrian, that would work very well for the Parkline Trail. And so these standards include the building, coming up to the trail rather than being separated by a parking lot. It has a front entrance that you can access from the trail. It doesn't have long stretches of blank walls, which are very detrimental to kind of a feeling of engagement with the pedestrian. I did forward on the public comment from Jim Watson, who's involved with the Spring Creek Park, and he wanted to make sure that any design standards stretch on the rails to trails to the bypass and includes the Spring Creek Park, so that there's a seamless appearance and feeling of the trail system throughout that network. And this would apply to the commercial properties, including the commercial multifamily, but there is a few pockets of residential single family that would not obviously apply to it. So what I thought before we dive into the discussion of that, if staff could run through the standards we adopted for the downtown area, just to so the council can refresh their memory, or if you haven't seen it, to see it. And this would not be specifically the Main Street ones, but the one that applies to the entire downtown area.
So are you looking for the downtown historic? Because there's two sets of standards. There's the general ones that would apply everywhere, and then the only other one we'd have would be the downtown historic district design
The
standards.
general one applies everywhere.
The general one that applies everywhere?
Yep.
So in terms of that, our architectural review standards are fairly general when you're looking at citywide on what those are.
No, I'm sorry. They're let me pull it up. It's
21A030.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And I guess my point is that that's under the downtown historic district design standards, so it's specific to a downtown area. It's not a
Yeah.
citywide type of standard that you'd have.
Yeah,
which
there's
is a
just
separate
another one that's more specific to Main Street as well, so
Yeah.
I was trying to distinguish between those two.
Okay.
But yeah.
Yeah, so
absolutely.
this kind of shows the different areas there. You got a downtown historic district, and you have a Main Street historic district that has more specific standards that come along with it. And we're trying to get to here. And so you were looking for 030 as part of that, right?
Yes.
And yeah, the way it's laid out, we got site design, architectural character. With A being, place and design to present the front and primary facade to the block frontage. That's highest in its order of precedence on there. Talks about human scale, visual interest. New buildings at the corner of the intersection would be placed to present a front and primary facade on both street frontages. Gets into the use of the type of windows, and then scaling buildings to pedestrians and things that you would be trying to incorporate, such as recessed bays, protruding recessed entries, awnings, other architectural elements like dormers, changes in plane, changes in building material and siding style, and windows, but kind of incorporating at least 3 of the following elements, but not necessarily all of them. There'd be standards that would tie into parking facilities, mainly looking at a parking structure, and then standards that would apply to service, loading, outdoor storage, and mechanical areas.
Right, and then if you could go back to the core area plan and just, I know we had one image on there, but there was a few, if I remember, there was a few different renderings of kind of what the trail might look like. I just thought those were really good in terms of identifying what it might look like.
The one end, with the core area plan, a lot of it has to do with the tracks and taking them out and establishing the Parkline Trail. And then kind of the vision of the redevelopment that would happen around through that area. You can kind of see the core area plan kind of stretching, basically between Idaho and Center Street from one end of town to the other, following where the tracks were in place. But yeah, there's a number of renderings that are through here as the different things that could be in place.
I'd say the one thing that has happened since this plan, so the zoning doesn't prohibit any of this either. So just so the council's aware, the zoning's been, or the entire core area has been rezoned in a way that this is all basically permitted at this point in time as far as setback and height and uses and all that. So that was a major thing that the council had done previously is do a rezone of the entire area to reflect this type of development.
Right. So we had created that B3 zone that would apply there. And part of that, or a big part of that, was coming out of this core area plan because it talked about, encouraging some of these things that the plan wants to see. And what it used to be was a B5 zone, which was a kind of a hybrid industrial commercial zone that kind of reflected all of the, industrial uses that were along the track. It had setbacks, B5 didn't allow the residential use in there. B3 kind of opened that up. And so B3 is really in a lot of ways the broadest zone that we have in town in terms of uses. Now any of the residential is permitted anywhere, but this was something that was permitted in that zone. We had no setbacks, no minimum lot size, 50% reduction in parking to try to encourage those things to happen there. But that was what council did to try to implement that plan in addition to having the Parkline Trail constructed.
Okay, so open this up for questions or discussion. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you. Yeah, are you recommending changes to this? Are you?
Not to the core area plan, no, just to the zoning, basically taking the zoning we have for 2721A 030, applying either those standards are very similar to the Parkline Trail stretch for properties adjacent to the trail. And I don't also, because of, I think the intention is to get more density along the trail. I would also require that it be more than one story. Because I don't want to see, we had, a complaint when we were first developing the Parkline Trail, there was a new building that went in, it was a title office. I don't think it's a title office anymore, but it was a single story structure. And it was one of those properties I think people were identifying as this will be a great infill property. We'll get, another place with some housing on there, on upper stories and retail on the bottom. And it came in single story, an office space. I was like, lost opportunity. So that's kind of the goal, is trying to fulfill the vision through zoning, just as we did with our downtown standards. Mr. Walker.
No, I like it. I think
I jump in real quick, just, so if it's a direction council wanted to head, it's not something that council needs to flush out. It's something that council could direct, it's a planning commission thing that they could work on, but only if it's not facilitated through staff but if it's a direction council wanted to head, it just direct staff and the planning commission to work on development standards. They could work on them, they could do work sessions, and they could develop something that ultimately would come up to the city council as an ordinance. It would be a zoning text amendment, likely, would it include a layer around the entire core area that had additional development standards. That's just like the downtown did. The downtown development standards were really a result of trying to preserve the historic character, but a lot of that does bring in that built environment, which is what the mayor's looking for. So not looking for any necessarily you picking and choosing any design standards, but it's whether or not there would be any support of the idea, at which point it could kind of funnel up through the planning commission.
Mr. Dowd.
Thank you, Your Honor. So this term, my second term here, started in 2025. And it was completely clear from the people in my ward and the people of Kalispell in general that their number one concern above everything else, far above everything else, was the high cost of housing and the lack of it. So when I sit up here, at times I might seem like this heartless individual that doesn't care about all of these other things, but I'm weighing all of this against my primary purpose for being up here. But the number one thing that the constituents want me to do is to not hinder and, if possible, correct our housing problem, right? So in order to, I think that, and maybe Councilor Waterman can actually give us a better insight into this, but the design standards on Main Street, when you're talking about housing or a business, it is more expensive to have a business on Main Street than it is to have a business somewhere else, primarily because of these design standards, right? And the desirability of the area. I am very apprehensive about placing design standards on the Parkline Trail right now because of the situation we're in right now and what I feel is my number one priority right now. I'm also historically, I think everybody knows, I'm very protective of private property rights, right? I want people to be able to leverage their private property to, to the way they want it to, and hopefully to a better income. I do know that in Bozeman, they adopted the commercial on the ground floor and the housing above requirement for the 5 blocks surrounding their downtown or their main street. And the long-term effect of that was it basically drove out all of the local businesses and all of the existing residents because they could no longer afford to live there. So I'm really hesitant about diving into this without some assurances that we're not going to be overly not taxing is a bad word to use on government, but we're not going to be overly, putting a burden on people that want to have a business or a multifamily along the Parkline Trail. So I'm a little bit, not a little bit, I'm very resistant to this unless I can see what the clear benefit is going to be. It's the same thing like, when we came up with the environmental things that we were talking about earlier, I seem like just a jerk because I'm up here like I don't care about animals and stuff. I do. I mean, I especially waterfowl after the whole duck thing at Woodland Park, right?
It keeps coming up.
I'm going to keep coming back to that because it was so influential on my government experience. But anyway, but the fact is that anything that we do that's going to make private property either lose its value or more expensive to build there, I'm very hesitant right now on doing any of that stuff because I don't want to hinder the market correcting itself and our housing prices coming down. And I might be in a unique situation. I don't know the current makeup of our council. I used to be the only person on council that rented. I think I still might be, I'm not sure. But I have a very unique example of this. In 2025, when I first got put on this council, the house that I was renting got sold from underneath me. I had 30 days to move out. And not only did I have to move out, I had to move into somewhere else in Ward 4 or I lose my council seat, right? It was very stressful. I understand what it's like to be briefly homeless anyway. And it's something that's very near and dear to my heart. So I really take this seriously when I'm up here. I look at everything that passes by and I say, are we assisting the local economy to bring itself down, or are we hindering it? So I'm hopefully going to pass it along a little bit to everybody else up here, but that's where I'm sitting right now when I'm looking at this. I'm not too sure if this is appropriate now. Of course, you could come back with the argument that if we don't do it now, it's going to be too late, right? I just have a big heart in this area, and I keep feeling bad when I get pulled away from my number one thing that I'm supposed to be doing for the people that, put me here. So anyway, 2 cents. I don't have much more than that. I do know that if you really wanted to study what the effect of the commercial on the bottom and housing above mandated effect is, you can take a look at Bozeman. They actually lost some council people over this, after the effect was felt. So I want to make sure that we're not making any kind of rash decision that is going to oppose our primary reason that we exist right now.
Ms. Gabriel.
Thank you. We worked really hard on this plan, like decades. And I think the only person in the room that's been here longer than me is PJ. And I know he can remember back to when this whole thing started. I'm hearing things like the parking lots. Well, I get a parking lot isn't necessarily pretty to look at. Where are you going to park the people like me that don't live down there, that want to go enjoy the trail? So you got to park them someplace.
Behind the building.
So I hate.
The idea is just to clarify, the idea is not to prohibit parking. It would just be behind the building. The building would front the trail, and then if they have parking, it would be behind the building. I just want to clarify that point.
All right, and then whose intention is more density? Who wants that? Who's asking for that, in other words?
I thought this council was fairly united in infill development. We've heard that a lot, and so I thought we were fairly united on the support for infill development.
My definition of infill development is different than density. Infill development is developing empty lots into useful spaces. What I'm hearing are multiple layers and multiple stories. Multiple stories create less eyes on the trail. One of us just said we want to be able to have eyes on the trail and to see it. If we have multiple stories, who's going to see the trail? I just hate to see us tear apart a plan we worked so hard to create and got the funding for. And now that we're there and developing, I hate to see it all torn down and see us start all over again.
I guess just to clarify, with the second stories, I would assume the people living and working in those second stories would be the eyes on the trail.
A little more historical perspective, just since we have a new council member. The previous council had also looked at.
But it's the same thing of putting 100 cameras in a small building. Unless they are actively looking and willing, it's nothing. It's just talk, right? And I think when you drive down there and you see all the curtains that are pulled, they're not looking. They're there. They're not looking. So I don't agree with that philosophy on that. I think there's better ways to have that sight onto it, and that is a little bit more open, not as closed, right? And I saw this firsthand as I spent almost a week in Houston, where there is tons of people living within a 2 square mile area more than what is in Montana. They're there. They're not really providing that oversight of security, safety of the area, right? So just because you cram them and stack them doesn't mean they're necessarily eyes doing what we want there. And even if they see it, how many times have we seen videos of somebody seeing somebody getting assaulted or robbed? Nobody's calling 911, including the person filming it. So I want to balance that.
But it's certainly better than no eyes on this.
I would venture to tell you that, yeah, there's more eyes on the roads that can see that area rather than somebody stories up.
Swatter.
When it comes down to this, I mean, I do think that this has been a key project for the council for a long period of time. Area is that area which is lagging behind, for other words, but I think that we have the TIF to be able to reinvest in that area. And when we did the Parkline Trail, some of the things that we didn't do was punch streets through because we didn't want to complicate the process of developing the trail. Again, I would say sort of in that West End TIF area is a space that we've talked about that. Not only about roads going through, but also making sure that there's infrastructure there to, go to Mr. Hunter's point, build up. Because right now, the challenge is that the infrastructure and the roads aren't there necessarily to even give a developer the opportunity to build up. Their impact fees would be so high, and they would have to brunt the entire cost to build the roads, build the infrastructure, and be able to do that. And I think when it comes down to, I think what all of us are talking about, we would like to see the private developers have the opportunity to create some of these housing solutions. So that's, I guess, where my interest is in around the core area, is that, again, we have some areas that seem like they need to be kick-started a little bit. We also have the West Side TIF, which is very bloomed. And I would also just, in general, say, I think the West Side, I mean, I think sometimes we end up focusing too much on downtown, as somebody who loves downtown, and appreciate that we have standards to help protect our historic buildings that are in downtown. And that's why we have those, and I think a really good spot to have standards like that. But what I really am interested in is seeing some action to help make sure that, one, we're focusing on the West Side, off of Meridian, which I think also needs that development, but also really getting into sort of the first conversation that we're having here. If we are not able to incentivize having developers develop housing at 300 units plus, I don't think we're having the affordable housing conversation that we need to have. It's not something that's going to happen at 20 units at a time. It's going to happen in large scale. And again, I think that there's an interesting thing in the core plan and stuff like that. And again, I was looking at just the, I believe it's page 26 of the core plan, PJ, if you're able to pull that up. I mean, it just shows like where the West Side TIF really falls into the, into this plan. And to me, I have a lot of motivation. I agree in the standards that if we overburden things and put down requirements on things, we're not going to do that. But I do think that there's actually this development issue that's happening. And personally, I think that our current zoning and architectural review sort of does that. Am I correct that it's a little bit further down, I think, page 24. Up. That's the map I was talking about. I mean, that's just where in the core plan, the West Side TIF fits into the side around that's mainly around Albertsons. That is also, I just know that where we're missing the pipes in the ground, and maybe it is a road street going through, but I think there's a huge developmental, like, we do shoulder the county's responsibility. Like, we have the most in this area has the most high density, already approved zoning that we have pretty much in the county, where we can get those 300 unit plus developments. And to me, that's where also somebody can use the tax credits. They can maybe come up with create a project, but not if the impact fees are so high that they're not able to do that. And again, I think that as a council, we have some opportunity to finish off this, to continue to work on this plan, but on an area of this area that really needs some focus and and there is some public dollars to be able to put into it, to move things. So I guess I'm not as interested in the looking at the standards, because I do think that the zoning and the standards generally cover where we are. Maybe we're not at that moment yet, unless there's something that specifically. I mean, I think Mr. Hunter, I know you've listed off a couple of those about the park, the trail itself. But where I'm interested in the conversation going is about the West Side TIF, because I do think that there is a huge component here which we can take action on.
Mr. Dunn.
Yeah, so the entire area pretty much that the trail runs through was considered blighted in some fashion. It's either really close to the downtown TIF or it's part of the West Side TIF. And, you know, standards over and above what's already here may hinder people from moving in there and trying a business or whatever, and that's something else to consider. And you know, I'll just throw this out there here again, and I know that this is not a widely held belief, but from my, I spent almost 10 years in Europe, and if you don't go up, you go out and you lose the wilderness around you, right? The reason that we're all here really is because of the amenities we have just right around us. I know people are very resistant to that. It's not a very Montana thing, right? People don't want to see multi-story buildings, but it really does save you later on. First off, it's cheaper to make. You can get more units made in a shorter amount of time, and it pencils out better for the developers, right? We already have pretty good standards about how far that they can go up without having to, in fact, I don't know if they have to come before us at all now. It's a question for Jared and Malupa.
So I'd interject real quick, Mr. Dowd. I mean, that was one of the zoning changes that when we discussed changing zoning, we took off height requirements, because height requirements can be addressed by fire suppression systems now. I mean, so it's not about how tall the ladder of the fire truck is. We did that, and when we changed the zoning here, we took off the height requirements.
I know, because I physically
agree
got
with you
yelled
on that,
at one day about that, about how our fire truck ladders can't go up that high. But anyway, I'm very. We looked at PUDs a few years back, and without really officially doing this, we kind of let it be known. This is the kind of stuff we're looking for.
Yes.
And what happened right after that? We got these PUDs that came in, these multi-use areas that were great mixes of use. They were very unique and like pretty cool little areas, right? And the developers did this without us having to zone them or force them. We kind of let it be known, this is kind of what we're looking for. And I don't think we've ever put our wish list out there. This isn't something that we would mandate. This is something that we would just communicate, right? And maybe the first place to start with that is the planning board and say, hey, this is the kind of stuff that really, you know, we love here on the council. This is what we're kind of looking for. This is something that will enhance the Parkline Trail, will enhance downtown. I would love to give things a try before we start mandating things.
Yeah, I just want to address a few things. I'm a little bit confused this comment and how it compares to your previous comment, because you're talking about housing being more expensive, but then density is cheaper, and that's what I'm actually that's part of what I'm trying to accomplish here, in terms of housing. Like, if that single story office building that went in just before the Parkline Trail got finalized, that's a missed opportunity for housing. The fact that we didn't build, that was not built with housing above, multi-stories, is less housing supply, and therefore that didn't contribute to bringing down the cost of housing with more supply. And that was a missed opportunity. And so I don't see how it increases the cost
Well,
of.
the problem with what Bozeman did is they required commercial on the bottom floor instead of letting it be all multifamily or all commercial.
And I'm not proposing that.
Yeah, okay, well, that's what it sounded like, so that's why I made
No,
that
no.
comment.
I mean, if you look at the standards, it's just, front facing, adjacent to the trail, multi-story. But what's on the ground floor? I think it'd be great if it's retail. But like the Silos project, the only problem I had with the Silos is that it had the kind of blank wall, the parking on the ground floor. And this would require some breaking up that kind of wall space and having like an entrance onto the trail. That would be the only difference that these would require for what happened on the Silos project. But that's all housing, and so I'm okay with that. I'm okay with all housing. I think we'll get a mix of development coming in, that some will be all housing and some will be, I'm hoping, retail on the bottom and housing above. You mentioned Main Street, that businesses are struggling because of the standards we have on Main Street. I don't know that there's been anything that's been built since we put these standards in place on Main Street, so I don't see how.
I think that just proves my statement right there. Nothing's been built since we put these standards in, so.
Well, but I don't know that we've heard that the standards are preventing any development from occurring on Main Street. I mean, if that's the case, I'd like to know if, we're hearing from folks that those standards are preventing development. In terms of the road, Mr. Waterman, the road going through, reporting in the papers about the mall development is that's part of their plan, so I'm hoping, we may get some of that. And I agree with you, TIF and the west side, I hope, in fact, the next conversation about the city lot, I hope that might come into play there, potentially there as well. But I would hope that we could do two things at once. We can do that, focus on that, but also get some standards I just think once something's developed on the Parkline Trail, it's going to be there 100 years. So if we get a single story office building with a parking lot on the trail, and that's the cheapest thing to build, and we get that, all these, empty lots or redevelopment lots that we see on the trail that we're hoping for create a wonderful trail system. And instead, developers come in, what's cheapest? Single story, office space, and they don't know, this vision's been out here a long time for the core area plan. And I don't get a sense that, necessarily developers understand the vision. So we could have a lot of development going on the trail, and it'll ruin this plan. And in terms of Ms. Gabriel's comments, like tearing this plan apart, no, this is what I'm proposing is actually saving the plan from being a waste of time. Because if we don't do something, and if we get more development like a few of the lots we've seen, we're going to waste the opportunity we had with this plan. And just, in terms of density, there's nothing required other than a second story. I mean, I'm hoping that we get more density than that. I'm hoping we get 4 stories, 5 stories. That would be what's best, I think, for the trail, for our downtown, for revitalization. But I'm not requiring anything beyond I wouldn't propose requiring anything beyond a second story.
And for clear, the downtown standards don't require multi-story, just.
That's the new.
So that would be new. It definitely focuses on making sure the building is kind of there's an entry to the street, very urban. Doesn't require multi-story, so if that's something council wanted to consider, that would be, something else. I will say there are a couple things that, would have to work through the planning commission. There are a lot of through lots and things, so there may be lots that actually front on a street and the trail. Well, what sets precedence, the street or the trail? So there's a lot of nuances that would have to go through the planning commission if that's the route council wanted to consider. But certainly would just be looking at direction of whether support any standards, and then I guess if that's the case, also if you want to require multi-story or not, that would all be something that certainly adding stories does add cost. So that's something to consider. Construction changes, especially when you start to mix uses. You mix commercial and residential, that raises the cost because now you're mixing uses. If you have a restaurant below restaurants, you have fires. It just fire separations and all that. It creates a management issue for companies because they don't want to manage commercial and residential. That's why, the Parkland Towers, for example, they were looking at mixed use, but decided they couldn't do the two different uses. I know that's not what's being proposed, but certainly as a landlord, considering managing two different uses in the same building, some people can do it well, but some people can't. Certainly if the worst thing for a property is not being able to manage it properly, because that's what's going to kill revenue and ultimately lead to decline. If you can't manage it, then that would be a bigger concern for us too. So.
Mr. Leffridge.
The Park Lane Trail certainly is a unique opportunity for our community. A couple years ago, when there was that makeshift food truck park where the Take 10 or whatever it is now in, and we would take our kids on the trail and ride down there. It was a destination. It was somewhere that you could get without having to be on a main street. Riding bikes on Main Street isn't actually that fun. But being able to ride the trail, to go have lunch was great. There's not really anywhere to go anymore now that that's gone. I am all in favor of what Mr. Waterman was saying in terms of figuring out opportunities in order to incentivize development along the trail and incentivize it in a way that makes sense. To the extent that we're talking about, kind of restrictive standards, that may have the opposite effect, which I think is some of the concern that I think we're kind of hearing around here. But recognizing that our goal is to take this area and have it be redeveloped in a way that is beneficial to our community and to incentivize developers in order to utilize it in the way that the land use plan has identified, that we've all talked about at great length. I'm all in favor of that. I hate to give myself more work, but if we want to kick this to the Planning Commission to have a conversation about how we can best do this, to integrate these plans and to come up with new ideas on how to utilize either standards or incentives in order to do it, again, I'm all in favor of that.
Thank you, Your Honor. But ultimately, we already have the mechanism so that if a developer did come in and wanted to do something larger today, build a 10, 20, 30, who knows what? I hope not, but, there's already that process if a developer came in and wanted to build something there, right, today. Even with the standards, I mean, they could put in for a PUD or something in there, right?
They wouldn't need a PUD.
So wouldn't even necessarily. But I mean, if we left it as is, we don't add on a lot of work. There's still an avenue for them to go in and do stuff there. It comes down to the developer that has the money and the business plan to be able to do it, right? Today. So I don't know. I don't know that we need to go through all the work to do it. It's there. The plan's there.
Is there support for
6, VJ? I mean, this is where we sort of get into those policies. And it would be great to hear from the planning board, like, do they find that we're doing that? I think the one thing that's really missing from these policies that are sort of recommended is Mr. Hunter's recommendation of where is front facing on a trail and on this specific park, because like some of these standards that we already have in the city say the streets, the front facing, and there is a unique quality to the trail. But I would sort of encourage, if the way it was framed, to look at this section, also look at the west side of what recommendations might be there to make sure that we're incentivizing or considering items. That would be using the planning boards to their best skill to give us some recommendations, making sure that they're looking at, are we accomplishing these policy recommendations?
Yeah, and just to be clear, my recommendation was that the standards would establish the trail as the priority over the street for the fronting. So if there is a corner lot or a back street, that the building would prioritize the trail as the frontage for the building. Obviously, you can have a frontage in the back of the building that faces the parking lot and the street or whatever, but that the priority would be the trail. That was where I was going with that, but.
So it just brings up, sorry, it brings up one question in my mind. Because I think to the city that we don't say the name of to the north, that went with all four-side architectural design.
I asked about that, and nobody knew what you were referring to. That I asked.
Look at
So
Safeway. Look at the food bank.
I asked the food bank.
Right.
Yeah, they didn't know what you were talking about. So
Yeah, there's
I'm confused.
there's four-sided architectural design requirements up there. At least, and maybe they got rid of it now.
It's not
but-
frontage. It might be kind of like the siding.
It's not a frontage, correct. It's like still the back, but you drive to Albertsons or Super One or any of those, you look at the back, right? It's CMU wall. But up there, they had to go and do architecturally pleasing things even to the backs and sides of those buildings, which drove up the costs of those buildings, right? And so if we're saying that the front is going to be that view of the park line, are you saying the sides and back are just CMU walls then that would be on the street?
I'm not proposing anything for the sides or the back in terms of the
Okay.
stairs.
Okay.
We have.
So we're just looking for council direction on whether you support, because it gets very complicated.
Sorry,
We do
didn't
have
mean to get into the
so
weeds.
the architectural review committee does look at that, and they look at the side and rear buildings, and they try and mitigate that. Other things that, you don't always think about is the slope of like that. So those are all the things that planning commission would be able to work through, with the idea of certainly you could create some pretty general standards that would work, but we just need to know if it's something council would even support the idea behind that. We wouldn't be creating precedents, that's for sure, but it would be another development standard that will add cost. That's the way it is, but it's also quality of life, built environment, all those things about building out the city that cities take into account. So we do have the West Side TIF. The city can mitigate the cost by helping pay for those costs if it's the vision they want, even if it's for private development, but the council's gonna have to choose, you're gonna subsidize private development because it's the vision you want. There's been a lot of hesitancy of giving a private developer money, but if you want it, you're gonna have to pay for it, because that's what the TIF's there as well. So it's a bit of shift in that methodology as well, so.
And is there data that would show that would incentivize private business to engage?
I mean, if the idea is that you're gonna require four-sided architecture on the building, or maybe create some sort of entrance that has maybe a bit of public utility towards it, you would probably be able to get the reality, a lot of private developers don't do it because it's gonna cost a lot of money, but it's something that was subsidized, I'm sure that they would do it, and that is in our TIF policy, doing things that are above and beyond, the IBC or the International Building Code that they could request TIF for, so it's already in the TIF policy, but the dollar amounts tend to be limited and the process tends to not incentivize it enough. Similarly to the facade grant program that we did for downtown business owners. The reality is that dollar amount's not enough. That's why it's not being utilized. The reality is these things, $5,000 isn't gonna do it for a private developer nowadays. 10,000 is not gonna do it. It's gotta be in the hundreds of thousands to make it worth it for a private developer to go through that. But if you really wanna make the vision reality, I mean, that's what communities do. They whether it's a waterfront in Washington DC or whatever it may be, they paid to make that happen. They incentivized the developer to make it happen, knowing that they were gonna get that increased tax base off of it. So it's just it's a decision on whether the council wants to head that route or not.
Thank you. So for me, I would support that. We know the downtown's struggling for a lot of reasons. We need something. and this would be a way to use that. So I recognize that we're not necessarily in agreement, but I would say trail facing with TIF supports to incentivize the development we know would bring people and economic success to the area.
Sounds like directing the planning commission to look at ways to incentivize fulfilling the core area plan along the Park Line Trail, see what they come up with. In terms of TIF, I support TIF for public infrastructure, sidewalks, that sort of thing. I am somebody who's very reluctant to use TIF for the private side of the development. I know there's costs for having multi-story. I don't see costs for the rest of this. There has to be a front of the building somewhere, right? I'm just saying which side of the building it's going to be on in terms of the standards I'm proposing. So I don't see extra costs there, and that, we have, the standards already for the rest of our downtown. So, questions of topography and that, drainage and stuff didn't come up then. But obviously, if that's an issue, that'll have to be discussed and dealt with. But again, that's with any development, you have to address those. So I'm not super comfortable about going and paying a developer to address things they generally have to deal with any other development too. So, but anyways, I don't want to prejudge. If we want to just kick it to planning commission to kick around some ideas, have a discussion and see what they come up with, we can move on the discussion. Okay.
I haven't really heard that council wants to do that, by the way. So I would really appreciate yes, no, because I'm not getting any guidance here that there's support on that or not. So I would appreciate some guidance on
Yes.
whether or not you support the planning commission working on some standards or some ways to incentivize development along the Parkline Trail. I will say the B3 zone was about as big as an incentivization as you could get. 0 setbacks, unlimited height, no density requirements. I mean, it literally did it all. That's why it was essentially like an enterprise zone. So unless we're talking funding, there's nothing else to do, which is actually the Urban Renewal Agency then, not the Planning Commission. So I just,
You're saying everything's in place.
And yet we've had,
unless you want to require it.
Meet it.
Unless you want to require development meets, I mean, as far as the zoning allows it, but the question is, do you want to require development to front on the trail? That is the question, and do you want to direct planning commission to come up with standards to do that? I just want to make sure it's clear what we're talking about. So the question would be urban, anytime a building's built,
Okay.
it's on the trail and fronts the trail, and if that's what council wants to do.
Mr.
If
Fisher.
we had 30 people lined up and it was a hot commodity, maybe we'd have some flexibility, but it seems to me the process is there, Your Honor. Really does.
Mr. Walker.
I think the Parkline Trail is too valuable to waste it. I don't think we can afford to just throw our hands up and say what it'll be, whatever it'll be, and if it, turns blighted again, so be it. I just don't think that's the way to go. I think we. Yes.
Ms. Gabriel.
No. I think it's already in place.
So I'm a yes. So we have a majority yes. The yes is for, just to be clear, kicking it to the planning commission. Mr. Nygren pointed out that the complications of incentivizing is paying for, if it's using TIF money, that's urban renewal. So that would be kicking it to urban renewal but we don't have a project to pay. So
I think I've got direction. Ultimately, anything that comes up to the planning commission will be by ordinance and will have to go to the city council as well. It's not like at this point, the planning commission can have their own work sessions, involve the public, work around some development standards. And certainly another side road is the incentivization of private development on the urban renewal side, which there are some TIF policies out there. So I think it just, we'll have to balance the two as it works through, but I'm not in a spot where I could say where it's gonna land one way or another. I mean, the planning commission will have the ability, just like the council does, to have work sessions, have discussion, and then come up with some standards. And then based off of that as well, we can start to communicate with the urban renewal agency and look at whether or not any policy recommendations should come out of that as well. I just think that any development standards that the council imposes above and beyond, the way you could mitigate that is by helping with those costs, is what I'm saying. If it is such a public benefit to do that on the trail, that's how you could go about that. So they could work hand in hand.
That's what my yes is tied to. Yeah.
Okay. An open yes for further consideration by our committees. Okay. It's 9:00. I do think this third one ties in very well to the advisory committee. So I would like to jump into it and get a little bit of direction. It will be a general direction like we just talked about.
Your Honor, I'm going to ask that we not do that,
Correct.
please.
Okay.
Not that I don't agree, it's an important conversation, and for that reason, it's late, and we still have public comment, and I want to make sure they have time if they have things to say, and that we have time for discussion.
Okay.
We are losing the public at this point.
Yeah. All right. For picking this up, so we have 2 remaining items on the agenda. A future work session. What would you see, Mr. Nygren, for a schedule for that?
I can't predict that because ultimately it depends. We've had a number of work sessions requested, so certainly it's on my radar. The public will be noticed, but I can't give a date at this point in time as to when we would be able to discuss the final 2 agenda items. So.
Okay.
What's our next work session?
2 weeks from now.
2 weeks, what do we got? Yeah, we got water and sewer facility plans coming up. We talked parking recommendations that I would like to bring back to council before I actually have it before council for an actual ordinance. Yeah, Parks and Rec Master Plan, so a lot of things that council has already kind of been in the works that, we'll have to continue. We'll get it on the agenda, it's just I don't know if it's gonna be here in the next 2 weeks, given what's been talked about in the past and making sure we can continue to fulfill those duties.
Okay. Open it up for public comment on either of the items we spoke about or anything else. Please step to the mic, state your name, or raise your hand if you're online.
Kim Morisaki, 1329 Bald Eagle Loop in Kalispell. Very interesting conversation you're having this evening. I'm here as the Executive Director of Northwest Montana Community Land Trust, which was started by the City of Kalispell in 2009. Up until 2020, you had 52 homes that were considered affordable, that were purchased with grant money secured by your staff. And it was just within the city limits of Kalispell. Since 2020, 20 additional houses have been added to that inventory, and this is a home ownership program where the land trust is a nonprofit. It owns the land underneath the homes, and the homes are sold to homeowners, and they benefit from the traditional benefits of home ownership, but they buy the house at a below market rate and they sell the house at a below market rate. It was brilliant that the city of Kalispell did what they did in 2009. They bought houses, and those houses now are being sold to the second or third family. and they're being sold for between $165,000 and $250,000 each. So they're very affordable. They're definitely workforce. There definitely is definitions of what is affordable and what area median income is and subsidized housing and rentals and homeownership. It's complicated, but it exists and it can be put on one page if you need it. The reason I tell you all of this is because I am also a member of the Collaborative Housing Solutions Group. And that Collaborative Housing Solutions Group is made up of 4 committees. One of them is permanent housing, and the other 3, I would say, tend to be more in line with homelessness or community communication. But the group that I am particularly involved with is very much about permanent housing, which can be home ownership or rentals. It's made up of about 6 or 8 nonprofits that are very involved in this community. And you asked for some examples of success. There are lots of examples of success that can be shared. And that particular group of nonprofits also works with for-profit and nonprofit developers, and we work with each other. And we work in all 3 cities, and we work with all 3 municipalities in different ways. We would love very much for there to be a tri-city group that we could regularly communicate with. Those main nonprofits are NeighborWorks Montana, which is a affordable housing finance group. They do financing across the state, and they are, bar none, the experts at what they do. NeighborWorks Montana. They have 6 or 8 staff members here in Kalispell, but they are all over the state. I was the chair of the Permanent Housing Solutions Committee last year. Naomi Valentine is with NeighborWorks Montana. She's the chair this year of that committee. The other groups, I wrote them down so I wouldn't forget: Habitat for Humanity, Housing Whitefish, Whitefish Housing Authority, the Warming Center, and Samaritan House, plus, of course, private individuals like Ryan, and also some for-profit and nonprofit developers. So big group. We decided that you all needed an inventory and a pipeline. So we created last month an inventory of all of the rentals and affordable home ownership units in Flathead County. We broke them out by low income shelters, subsidized rentals, mobile home parks, inclusionary zoning, affordable rentals, and then under the ownership, permanently deed restricted, temporarily deed restricted, no affordability restriction, and affordability restriction with first right of refusal. There are other home ownership types, both permanently affordable and affordable without deed or with deed restriction, but have gone to market rate, unfortunately. We also created a whole database about vouchers, because vouchers for renting are complicated. And our hope, now that we've completed this first draft, is to go out and share it with all of the staff for the City of Columbia Falls, the City of Whitefish, and the City of Kalispell, so that you know that we've got the data and we are in control of the data, and we're gonna update the data every quarter. We also have a pipeline of what we've got planned to be built in the 3 cities, which is, to tell you, where'd my pipeline go? Oh dear, I didn't print a pipeline. There are, I would say, 60 plus houses planned at the moment in the pipeline, at least. We work with the City of Columbia Falls and Habitat. We're building 6 houses on property that the City of Columbia Falls donated to Community Land Trust. Habitat is building the houses. Those houses will be permanently affordable. We're working with the City of Whitefish. We meet with them once every month or once every 6 weeks. They're creating their plans for what they want to do for affordable housing. They have 22 houses. Those houses also will go into the Community Land Trust at some point that will be built. There's it's not big. It's not 300 houses at a time. It's 5, 10, 20 houses at a time, but you got to start somewhere. I know I'm supposed to only tell you about this for 3 minutes, but the other thing that we're working on is there are houses that are rentals that will lose their subsidy and not be affordable in the future. We're creating an inventory of those buildings so that before they lose their subsidy and before they go to market rate, we actually have a plan to keep them affordable. And that is a place where we would love to have city partnership so that we could come in with a private developer or nonprofit developer or a land trust and say, hey, we're going to take these 50 units that are going to go from being affordable to being not affordable or to being market rate. And with some help from the city, we can keep them affordable permanently with a plan. NeighborWorks Montana is doing a fabulous job. All of these organizations I mentioned, we love working with each other. We meet each other all the time. We'd love to meet with your staff. And we have some pretty out-of-the-box solutions for affordable housing. And we like working with private developers too. So I just wanted to let you know those things are happening. I would love to create a map of what is happening. You mentioned that you would love to see that. That could be our next project. And I'm always happy to answer any questions, so thank you for your time.
Okay, Ms. Morisaki.
Good evening. My name is Erica Werdela. I'm on Kim's board from the Northwest Community Land Trust. Just one point that she missed was that all of our community land trust homeowners pay taxes, pay property taxes on their property, and they pay property taxes on their home. So this is not subsidized. There are models of community land trusts across the state and across the nation that some do, some don't, some pay sliding scales, whatever. But here in Kalispell, the Northwest Community Land Trust, those all are tax-paying properties.
Thank you, Ms. Wardlaw.
Hello, Rose Askvig, Liberty Street. I wrote it down so I wouldn't divert from the plan and wouldn't take too much time. So I think it is important to have a definition for affordable housing. Where I kind of get lost is where you bring the homelessness into it. I am opposed to any free housing for the hobo nation. I just can't support it. I would never wish for a disguised warming center housing unit in any neighborhood after personally dealing with the Flathead Warming Center, the additional crime increase, and the other issues that have come from inviting more homeless into Kalispell. I just ask that this board, this council, be very transparent in moving forward so that everybody knows what the plan is, what the definition is, and what the ultimate goal is. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Askvig. Okay. If you're online, I'll vote first.
Go ahead, Kyle. Kyle, did you want to speak?
Can you hear me?
There we go.
Yes.
Okay. Kyle Voigtlander, 840 4th Street West. I obviously normally come in person. Tonight I come via Zoom as business accounting took precedence, but it was nice to listen to the conversation online. So thank you. I actually surprisingly enjoyed the conversation that you guys had tonight, listening to it. Some things I wanted to point out. Kyle said that you guys got rid of the height requirement or the max height requirement on this zoning and planning that just came forward to you guys not that long ago. That was a terrible move. I don't believe it was ever put out to the community members appropriately. I would highly suggest that going back and adjusting that. We live in a beautiful place. Bozeman did it shoot, probably 50 years ago. They said, nothing over 4 stories. And it was a smart move because realistically, people move here for the outdoors. They're not moving here to look at sky rises. If they wanted to look at sky rises, they could live in Spokane, or Seattle or San Francisco. So I wanted to point that out in that context. But on the affordable housing, I think at this point, most of you know my standpoint on affordable housing. But the biggest problem with it is when you have affordable housing and you say, somebody making $30,000 a year or $35,000 a year or less can rent these homes. And Bozeman's going through it far worse than we are right now. I'm sure Missoula is too. That for people to qualify for those, they might be at that $34,000 income range, and so they qualify for it. But they have no incentive to work, to gain higher employment with where they work. They don't want to make more money because their housing is subsidized. So that's a big problem with subsidized housing. Sid, you pointed out some facts of Bozeman and requiring that they have shops down below and then housing above. That one is fairly new that I'm aware of, but it has caused some major issues. There's these. I was actually just down there about a week or two ago, and they built these ginormous buildings. They took out some dilapidated motels and a restaurant, and it had been 10 years coming. They'd been planning it for about 10 years, and well, the issue now is that the cost on those were so high to build that nobody can afford them. The cheapest unit is almost $3,000 a month for a 2-bedroom flat in the heart of downtown. So again, that comes back to the impact fees, the design requirements. Sam pointed that out, whether you require, all 4 sides of the building to be aesthetically pleasing. So those are all things to take into account. This affordable housing committee, it worries me that something like that would become a thing, because realistically, who's sitting on the board? I see this board, and sure, it might be helpful to some in some extent, but realistically, you're going to get people who are for affordable housing on the board. You're not going to get a wide variety of people on the board, or the committee, I should say. And so that's something that worries me on that forefront. Ryan, you talked about, making the trail forefront of buildings along the Parkline Trail. As much as I think that is a wonderful idea in somebody's head, the reality of it is majority of the lots along the trail are built out. There's not a lot of space. So what you're going to get is, if, for instance, the old hardware store gets torn down, or the loading docks, somebody's going to have to figure out how to build a building there that accommodates enough parking to supply the building, which isn't doable. And there's no parking on the street. And then they have to make it pleasing towards the trail and have an entrance or some sort towards the trail. You basically make the lot useless. A similar situation to compare it to is the down on 7th, east north, I believe, over towards what links to Whitefish Stage and Main Street. It used to be a frame shop, now it's a chiropractor. I have had multiple discussions with that owner of the building, and what he's had to jump through to open his office in that building. He already owns the building. But because it changed from a shop to a chiropractor, the city made him come in, and he's going to have to landscape and have parking spaces, dedicated parking spaces, which is all hunky-dory on paper, except there wasn't enough room. So in order to even run his business on his own property that he's owned for years, he had to pay the neighbor to have an easement to have 2 parking spaces. So regulation is a good thing, but it's also a bad thing. And, let's be smart about this. I think we have plenty of regulation on things. If anything, we need to revisit, A through Z on every regulation in the book, per zoning, and refine it. I think it's time, it's due, it's been due. And instead of trying to combat everything that everybody's worked for the last 20 years in Kalispell, we need to just improve it so it flows smoothly, and people can utilize their property. The last thing I'll leave you with, because I know I'm talking long here, is I happen to do a lot. Waterman, you spoke on the Albertsons area, Meridian, in that area, and that's always on my mind, given it's right around the corner from me. And I agree. I think the area needs development. I don't think the county helps with it much with the fairgrounds. Enough access to the fairgrounds. I think Sam would agree with that. People should be able to walk to the fairgrounds safely for events and not have to drive. The old Chevy dealer, I am aware of it being for sale. There may be some plans there for that, but how much are we going to put? If a developer comes in and we say you need X, Y, and Z because of these impact fees, so the city can, build a sidewalk so they can access it. How much are they going to pay? How much is worth it to the developer, and how much is it worth to the taxpayers? And unfortunately, I think I wouldn't say I think, I know from just talking with people, that people are taxed out in comparison to where we've been. Again, Montana taxes are very low to the rest of the country. Kalispell is very low to the rest of to other cities. But when you go from a ultra low tax rate to now a medium tax rate very quick, like we have, people are going to see it as a large increase. And realistically, it falls back, to everybody. I mean, the renters, the homeowners. And so we really have to be cautious of that. Renting is, as Sid said, is not affordable. You can be out of a place to live in a heartbeat. 2-bedroom homes are going for $2,000 a month. That's more than most people's mortgages on the west side. So let's just really be cautious of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beutlander. Any other public comment? Seeing none, Mr. Negrin, staff report.
Yes, do have a regular meeting next week. We'll have presentation from the business improvement, the Kalispell Downtown Business Improvement District, as well as the tourism business BID. The city was awarded the resiliency grant, you remember, a number of months ago. So I'll be likely putting that on the council agenda as well. It did require a match, if you recall. I do forecast that there will be some cash carryovers, so but prior to getting it on the or before final budget, I would like to talk to council about being able to sign the grant award agreement. That's for the generator at the public safety building. It's a $380,000 project for the generator. The council match would be about $90,000 in order to do that project. So at least would like the authority from council to initiate the grant agreement, and then I would have those final numbers in final budget. I'll have further discussion at the next meeting. That's all I got.
Council reports, start with you, Ms. Gabriel.
Thank you, Your Honor. I don't think I have anything to add.
So I'm going to add just two quick little short things because I had a very impactful week this last week. I had the opportunity to go down to Houston and spend a little time down in Houston doing some board meetings for a national political board that I serve on. And one of the things that we did was we filmed all of us board members in the identical replica of Independence Hall. And we all read the Declaration of Independence. And I would encourage you all, I read the Declaration and many of the documents throughout my time every other year or so, but to actually do it in one sitting with all the fellow board members and really taking the opportunity to listen to what it was that they did. I think it's important for all of us to take that opportunity and take a moment, read through it, and then go and understand what the words tyranny, all of the other words that are within the Declaration of Independence, and what they were going through when they wrote that document. I think it's important for us to all read that because we all live here today in a wonderful country because of what they did. So that was the one thing I wanted to talk about. The second thing was on the flight down, I sat next to the window just so I could see what the landscape of the country looked like. Flew down during the day. You can't quite see all the cities. Flying back, I was in the evening. And it was amazing seeing the size of the cities that we were flying over. And on the back seat, you can see what cities you're looking at as you look out your window. So it was interesting to see those size of cities and knowing in my head that I've always thought they were the bigger cities. And then as we flew into the Flathead, and to take a look as we came across that and how much larger we were than many of those large cities I've always had in my head. Go back to what you were talking about and what you're talking about. We are not a small city. When it comes down to it, we are a very small city if you look at it as what our jurisdiction is. But when you look at the county as a whole, the valley floor, when you're flying over at night, is one city. All of them. Big Fork, Lakeside, Summers, Kalispell, Evergreen, Whitefish, Columbia Falls. They are all one city when you see it at night. So I wholeheartedly agree that I think that there are times and opportunities where we take an opportunity and we look forward in the direction of where our county and our community is going. I use this example a gentleman gave to me many years ago was, look at what Washington, D.C. is today. My wife is in D.C. today, as I say this. 100 years ago, their forefathers of their city realized that they would not be able to move in Washington, D.C. or the surrounding communities if they did not have the forward planning to plan for transportation and put in the Beltway. And they did, and people laughed at them about putting in the Beltway. But think about it today. If you've been to D.C., you would not get anywhere if it wasn't for the Beltway that the forefathers of that city put in. And I think, seriously, we need to talk about what is it with Whitefish and Columbia Falls and Kalispell. But I think we need to figure out how to get the unincorporated components of our entire city to talk. So, just going to leave it at that.
Happy to sort of add on to that, Sam. I was over in Great Falls this weekend, last weekend. There they have a city of 65,000. Their county is 85,000. So I think that that's a really important conversation to talk about where we are talking about density. Again, 65,000 gives them the ability to be an entitlement city, to have public transportation, to actually have some coordination when they're talking about homelessness and these type of issues. We are a city of 38,000 in a county of over 100,000. So I do think that there is a serious conversation to be had there. Happy to sort of see that. I do think that one of those keys is, again, when we get into talking about it, it's like, how do we activate the West Side TIF? I'm enthusiastic to talk about what we could do so that it helps us get to that spot. And then also, while we're doing, just to add to the council's needing of extra reports, I would love a report from the our city county library, because I'm confused by reading what I see in the newspaper and what I hear online. It would be great if maybe we could invite the city county library to come and give us an update at some point of just where we are, because there's one of those partners which I think is really important for us to be sitting and talking about, and we're having a lot of other updates as we're looking at budgeting, but it is the city county library for a purpose. That is, we have an ownership in that, and I would just be helpful for, as we're talking about all these different issues, to also make sure that we get an update there. So if it is possible and if everybody is agreeable, it would be great to see at some point we get an update from the Flathead County Library. And that's all I have.
I always appreciate your ruminations, Mr. Nunley. The Declaration of Independence hangs on my office wall. I do think the time has come for a work session on how the city is addressing the lawless behavior downtown on Friday nights. I'm not proposing a new ordinance. I'm not asking the staff to prepare one, but I'd like a comprehensive report from the KPD, the city attorney's office, the judicial branch, city works, or public works, and MDT if possible. I'd like to hear what's been happening, the results of those efforts, and what can and is being done by the city. I believe and know that there is a lot going on behind the scenes from independent organizations, as well as what's going on inside of the city, those particular departments, and I think it's time for a comprehensive review of what that is. And if there are things that the council can do in order to support those efforts, the work session is a good opportunity to identify those things and to be fully informed about the status.
Mr. Walker is also in favor. I guess, see from council support for work session? On those lines? Mr. Dowd? Okay, I would also support Mr. Nunley.
And given the timeline and the fact that we're getting into the summer, I suspect that that should set precedence over some other work sessions we have. If I can do that.
Just a quick question. I mean, do we have anything scheduled for our fifth Monday this month?
I was just planning on repeating what we did last time with the event here at City Hall. Everybody invited, have a conversation individually with public that shows up. That was the plan.
I'm just opening that up to the council that could be a time that we could have an extra work session.
I hate to confuse the idea of Kalispell cruise with the lawlessness, because I don't think those two things are synonymous. I think that in vernacular, those things have been combined, but specifically I'm talking about people that flagrantly violate the law downtown while driving cars.
Every day.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's
Staff would be happy to go over the tools at its disposal in that regard and what we have done and get that to the council and have that discussion, because it is a process, what ordinances we do have in place without creating ordinances, and how we can enforce them and how we're enforcing them all the way through the judicial system.
There was a proposal to do it on the fifth Monday in conjunction with what we had planned, doing it first and then having that.
I don't
afterwards.
want, no conjunction with, it's gotta be,
One or the other.
it's gotta be on the agenda and it would be a discussion. And yeah, I don't feel like we'd be able to do more than just that, so.
I would prefer not, because I feel that's a promise I made to the community to do fifth Monday town hall, so I prefer not to renege on that. So I say a work session on another day.
Given the number of public comments, I would argue that this is what they want. And then I would suggest we do take that 5th Monday for that reason.
I concur.
And Mayor, I appreciate having the public comment, and maybe there's another way that we could find ways to make up a time for some community conversation. But it does seem like it's a pressing issue, and I just had volunteered that as just being a time when, knowing that we have a lot of things on our workshop agenda, but this is an issue which I think takes our address. I'd be happy to sit and see how we could have some other, hit that promise of having some public dialogue in a different format if it's not that 5th Monday, but just open that up as an opportunity, because I do think that this is one of those pressing issues.
Okay, sounds like there's support for 5th Monday. All right.
Nothing.
I was gonna just skip saying anything tonight, but Sam prompted me to talk about something briefly. And I was gonna not say anything because I've been listening to the Ramones all day, and who knows where I would go with this. But if you, I would challenge everybody, you know, I love the Declaration of Independence, but I would challenge you to read the Constitution. It's only 7,591 words. It's not a lot. It's a pretty quick read, as opposed to the U.S. tax code, which is 70,000 pages. Okay, not words, pages. So I challenge you to read that with your family sometime between now and Independence Day, so you can have a little bit more of an understanding of what's going on that day, especially since this is kind of a special year for it. So 7,591 words. That's including all of the amendments. So not that long. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the conversation, discussion this evening. I appreciate it. Good conversation, and with that, we're adjourned.